And we're live. We're live. This is the Dictators live stream that Jonathan Fink and I try to do every Friday. We've had a couple of weeks where we had to do it, I think, on a Wednesday. And 1 week maybe we didn't do it. It's new. I think we just started this. Was it in December?
Pretty much, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
This was the theme of our discussion anyway for the last couple of years, but it's the formal name, dates to then.
Well, what we're going to talk about today, and Jonathan and I were just talking off air, that we're going to focus exclusively on Davos, because really, that's what's happening right now. That's probably, at least for the Western world, if not the entire world, the most important topic, the most news topic, geopolitical issues of the day. So, Jonathan, why don't you start? I've got too much to say, and I don't want to take up all the time. So, what's the top of mind for you for Davos?
I wish, not just to sort of, put my trotters in the trough, but I wish someone had invited me there, because if I'd found myself in that room, I would have booed. I would have booed the guy. I would have stood up and booed him. And it's interesting because there was a guy called Alistair Campbell, who's a political kind of spin doctor in the UK. He was the main political spin doctor for Tony Blair. He's a very well-connected, powerful is maybe the wrong word, but he's incredibly well-informed and experienced. He's kind of formidable character. He was actually diagnosing or dissecting Davos with Anthony Scaramucci. Now, Scaramucci apparently was like, he didn't even want to be in the room. It's like a form of abuse. He just skipped it. And I guess saw it on the monitors. But Alistair Campbell was there in the room, and listening to that first-hand account is fascinating, because we'll go through the individual comments, but he said his main impression was that it was grotesque and horrifying, that those people around Trump, the advisors, the cabinet members, just the willingness to be obsequious, the willingness to condescend to agree with his version of reality, even if they know that it's absolutely lies, the willingness to be subjected to humiliation and to see others humiliate and revel in it. He said it was the most disgusting, degenerate political spectacle he'd ever seen. And then he booed quite a few of the comments, because I think some of the comments, even though they were delivered, if you compare Hitler's speeches to Trump's, and I'm not being facetious here, the dictators of the 1930s are incredibly exuberant. And there's this passion, the energy, and the flapping hands. It seems that Trump's delivery was very low key. The words weren't. The words are actually very, very comparable to some of the sort of tone and implications of fascistic language of the 1930s. But he was very kind of muted, didn't move much, seemed quite low energy. And in some ways that made the whole spectacle more horrifying. And there was Alistair Campbell saying that he was actually started booing at some of the more egregious lines. And there are people turning around to him looking at it as if like, oh, how dare you? That's where, as if they're sitting in a theater watching some kind of play unfold, and somehow this bore has come into their world, and how dare you? And he said, how could you not react with some kind of revulsion? How could you not physically react to the blatant lies, the humiliation, the disgusting debasement that he seems to want to project with his language and actions? So that was kind of interesting. And Scaramucci is an interesting character. He said, look, a lot of you guys don't want to use the word fascist, but the implications of what he's saying and what he's doing are entirely fascistic, but they also reek of dementia and narcissism and all that other stuff.
I don't know how the folks in that audience did not boo. I don't know how they didn't walk out. In fact, that's a huge part of the problem, if not the problem, that they're still treating Donald Trump as a statesman, as a legitimate senior individual, as, yes, he is, of course, officially the president of the United States, but they're still giving him the respect that he doesn't deserve. He is threatening them. He is canceling alliances that have been made for 80 years. He is endangering Europe. He is encouraging Russia and China. He's endangering the entire international economic strata. He's threatening everybody. Not only that, as you said, he's insulting. He's insulting on an adolescent level. And for these senior leaders, economic leaders, political leaders, national leaders, to just sit there, even stony face, I don't care, They've got to stand up as a group and just tell this narcissistic criminal to shut the blank up and that they're not going to take it. This is the problem, Jonathan. You and I have been saying this for months, if not years. They need to stand together. They need to become united. I'm talking about Europe, of course, and not just say behind closed doors how embarrassing he is, how insulting he is, how dangerous he is. They need to tell him to his face. And I want to ask you here on air, on the live stream, why the hell aren't more of Europe's leaders doing that?
I think there's a couple of levels of the problem here. One is they are all afraid. They're afraid of Putin. They're afraid of Trump. Zelensky is not. Ukraine is perhaps the only adults in the room that fear neither of these, because they're having to deal with it every day. They're having to deal with the consequences of standing up to pathological and psychological bullies. And their survival is on the line. They cannot kid themselves. They cannot pretend. They cannot fully debase themselves in this sort of political dumb show, this appeasement. Zelensky has to play along to a certain degree, but he doesn't do it to the point of allowing himself to be humiliated or his country. And that's the right kind of thing. You take the high route. And you don't give in, and you certainly don't pander. You don't call him daddy like Rutte did. I mean, Rutte is, for me, the most obsequious and pathetic of all of them. And I actually had an argument with Mr. Jonathan Pierce about that. He's saying Rutte's just doing what's in his job description. My argument is that maybe he's not hired to be a leader, but at that point, a true leader would say, do you know what? This job is incompatible. This is incompatible with my values. This is incompatible with the, not just the status, but the respect I have for myself. And I'm out. You'd be honest with yourself and you'd be honest with others. But that's not who Rutte is. In fact, he goes far, far beyond in basically kissing Trump's ass to fulfill his objectives. I think there's several layers of problem. They're afraid. They're afraid of what Trump will do to their economies and that their electorates will punish them. And this is a real fear. I mean, I can understand that. As a politician, you do not want to be annihilated in the polls. You do not want your country moving or lurching to the right or being taken over by extremists because you've upset Trump. I mean, this is going to happen anyway, to use the Churchillian phrase. You wanted peace and prosperity, and instead of war, and you're going to have neither. You're going to end up with war and pissing off anyway, and you're going to lose all of that stuff you're trying to protect. So this is where we're at. The other challenge I've got is, and there's two more just to list them, but I love you for them. One is that the media is still analyzing Trump through a geopolitical lens, through a rational lens, through as if this is politics as normal. But as a fantastic YouTuber, Vlad Vexler, points out, is we are in the post-truth era. The message he's delivering is not necessarily the message. You have to look at the outcomes he's trying to achieve. And in this particular audience, we may say that he failed and he was gross and he was this and he was that. He fundamentally succeeded. Why? Because no one's talking about Epstein at the moment. No one's talking about Epstein. 95% of that file data has not been released. It has done the job as designed. It's done another job, which is to force Europe to hoard or stockpile air defense and take the attention away from Ukraine. So it takes physical support away from Ukraine, and it takes the attention away from Ukraine. So it's delivered in buckets on both of those. The other delivery here, and this is why, unfortunately, it's particularly insidious, is many of those people in the audience were not just bored. Apparently they were bored as well. They're not just sort of bored or angry or whatever. They were relieved. Why? Because there's a lot of incredibly rich people there who, based on the phrases he was doing before he came to Davos, could see the stock markets tank. He then gave some nominal reassurance during Davos. The markets rose. Yep. They all, yay, ka-ching, get in. If they understand the pattern of Trump's behavior, they've made a fortune. If they don't really understand the pattern of Trump's behavior, they just haven't lost a fortune and they're relieved. But they're like, hey, we're back to normality. Everything's cool. it's a form of manipulation. It's an absolute manipulation of the markets. It's a manipulation of them. One can be assured that those close to Trump do understand the patterns of behavior and, like insider trading, quite possibly get a tip-off of what's coming next. So they know exactly the market movements based on his statements. Ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. So it's this inbuilt profit, selfishness, and manipulation, not just of the media and the audience, but of the markets for his own personal gain. This is why this was particularly insidious, I think, in my view.
Well, I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, we agree on all of that, and we've both spoken about that for a long, long time. Look, with Trump, it comes down to two things: me and money. As I've said, M&M, the two M's. It's me, him, and money. Nothing else matters. He lives in the world of chaos. I mean, he's a perfect Ruski. I mean, as far as the Kremlin's concerned, he invents, he makes chaos. That's just part and parcel of who he is. It's not really a strategy because it's part of his DNA. Yes, the offshoot of it is it masks all the other things. Epstein right now, the files, that's what's going on right now. Yes, he thought about that. I'm sure that if I talk about this or do that, they won't want to see the Epstein files, but he forgot about that. He's just going off on a rant. You talked about the media. They can't sink any lower, in my opinion, the mainstream media. As you said, they keep trying to analyze this from a geopolitical point of view. What's his real strategy? I can't tell you how many articles I read or podcasts I listen to about the real strategy behind Greenland. What is Trump really trying to do?
What's the four-dimensional chess? This guy is not even playing chess.
No, as I said, he's not
even playing tiddlywinks.
Playing three-dimensional chess on the Enterprise. He's a moron. He's a moron who hasn't read a book since high school, and that was Cliff Notes, and he paid somebody to read the Cliff Notes, for God's sake. You know, I mean, this is an idiot. This is an absolute moron.
He understands a few things. He understands marketing and messaging and markets. Oh, three M's. There we go. That's all he understands.
It's nothing that it's instinct. It's not something that he studied in.
No, it's pure instinct. Yeah, absolutely.
Pure instinct. And yes, he's good at it. Of course, he's very good at it, or he wouldn't be where he is. It's The Apprentice every day with him. It's show business. It's all theatrical. It's for show. And he's very, very good at that. And so are the best con artists. He is one of the best con artists. He's a grifter. He's a grifter. And the media fails to zoom in on that, to zone in on that, to key on that. They still don't say that for the most part, Trump is president because he wants to make money. He wants to grift. He needs to stay out of prison, and he needs to stay in the White House in order to grift. It's about me and money. There is no foreign policy thoughts around this. He doesn't give a damn about the U.S. Constitution, international law, human rights, civil rights, not even Russia. He does what he does because he aligns with what Putin thinks. It's not because he studied Russian history and the history of the Soviet Union and 1917 and all of that. He doesn't know anything. He probably still couldn't find Russia on a map. I'm sorry.
No. He does know one thing, though. He knows that Putin has as much contempt for law, rule of law, as he does.
Oh, yeah.
He understands
he has a natural
that
affinity to dictators. He gets along with.
That's the affinity. They have the same business model as he does. They see the world as something to be, predated upon, bullied, extracted from, grifted on, stolen from. He sees the world as his mark. And he says, right, those dictators, they understand that this is life. This is how you get on. And they're on his wavelength. Democratic leaders, he sees them as weak. Why? Not because of all the obvious weakness, because they're following the rules. People do not get that yet. No, they're John, weak because they follow the rules.
About his followers, though, the people that are on the stage with him. And I think we need, we need to follow up on that. He wouldn't be where he is today if he didn't have a cult behind him, if he didn't have the support of the Senate, of the Congress, both the House and the Senate. They've fallen in line with him. They are equally grifters and, in fact, more at fault and more responsible for what's going on right now than even Trump. Talk about that, the fact that in the United States, 30% of the electorate, if not more, actually 50% voted for him, but about 30% hardcore Americans still love him, no matter what he does every day. And the entire U.S. Congress and the Supreme Court is in his pocket. What does that say about us and where we're going even after Trump leaves the scene, which we all hope is very soon?
I mean, by all accounts, most of these guys, even though, as you say, they kowtow to him and they are terrified of him, I'm going here on what Scaramucci says. He says behind the scenes, they absolutely loathe him with a passion. And that presents another kind of thing is why and how would you debase yourself to such an extent if you have a sort of conscious knowledge of who this guy is and you actually have no real loyalty to him? That actually quite the opposite. You detest and hate, and you're hoping he's off the scene probably just as much as we do. Trouble is, once he is off the scene, he's broken the system. Yes. He's broken it to such a degree. The question arises, well, how do you repair it after Trump?
I don't know, but talking about this topic, the fact that he's being supported by the American government and a large percentage of the American people, this is staggering. Even with everything else, all the shocks that I read every day, to me, this is still staggering. The U.S. Congress yesterday, most of the government anyway, just passed our annual defense bill, which is $8 gazillion. I mean, it's literally $1 trillion. For the new defense bill, but that's not
so.
This
is passed, has it? This is the. I guess there's a lot in there for ICE. I'm assuming. I don't know if you.
Well, there's a lot for ICE. But the worst thing, in my opinion, and we could dissect it. And they passed this. They passed this, with, of course, the Democrats mostly staying against it. But basically, as part of the national defense bill, the defense budget that was just passed, the Congress, the American government, I'm going to quote here from Stars and Stripes, which I want to talk about that in a minute too. The Budget Committee on Thursday morning rejected an attempt by Democrats to secure a vote on an amendment to the defense bill that would have prohibited the invasion of a NATO ally.
Oh, so that hasn't gone through.
No, they voted against. No, they took the amendment out. They just canceled it. And then once it was gone, they approved the defense budget, as long as that wasn't in there. So they're allowing the president to attack a NATO ally. To them, that's just fine. So let's
that's cool. That. Yeah, they get their bit.
Yeah, I mean, wait a minute. But think about that. The United States Congress, the United States government just passed a budget that says that the president of the United States can invade, attack a NATO ally. And in fact, they wouldn't have passed the defense budget if that amendment had stayed in. So this is not Trump. This is the American government, which is voted in by the American people. This is America. This is the American people saying through their representatives, it's okay for the United States to attack, invade, and perhaps conquer and occupy a NATO ally.
That's
I can't tell you the loathing and disgust I have.
Given that only 4% of the electorate that were polled in any way thought an invasion, kinetic invasion of Greenland was a good idea. I mean, it seems that over the last sort of, since 2016, you haven't, at least, if not going back further, you haven't been able to get Americans to agree on anything. But the idea that, 70, whatever it is, 90 odd percent are all going to be aligned to say, no, we cannot take or should not take Greenland by force. And then, as you say, the legislature refuses to pass the absolute will, it would seem to me, of the people. That starts to get into territory where, to compare it to the rubber stamp Duma, is not, it's not outrageous anymore to say this is no longer a.
We have a Duma in America. I'm sorry. The Republican Party died on January 20th. If it was on life support way before that. And now this is the result. It's turned into a Duma. It's a rubber stamp, which includes, of course, the Supreme Court and many, many of our federal courts, as well as the Department of Justice, the FBI, and all the law enforcement. I don't know what you call it, Jonathan. If it's not a fascist state, if it's not pretty much a dictatorial, authoritarian state. I know MAGA doesn't care about those words, and I really don't care about MAGA because they're obviously morons if they can't see what's going on. I mean, their government giving approval to attack Denmark or any NATO ally. How can this be the same universe? I mean, and you mentioned that I think it was off air. I'm not sure if you said it on air about American veterans. Finally,
it was off air. We were talking about that
Trump
before. But yeah, there's a lot of veterans and serving military who, may not have been in Afghanistan and Iraq, but will have served alongside in NATO exercises. I think there's a broad disgust with those.
They lived in Europe. I mean, all of us have served at one point in Europe because that's where the bulk of American forces usually were stationed. If it wasn't in Japan, Europe. So to say that the government's given a green light to attacking a NATO ally whenever the president says so, I don't know how that can work. I really, really don't. I mean, every day we hear anyway about what will spark a civil war. God, if that doesn't, if he ever someday does give the green light to invade a Greenland or any ally with the United States military, and if an American general agrees to this, I don't know. I mean, if that's not a spark for a civil war, what is?
Yeah, no, precisely. I took the comments off because there's an odd comment there. This guy's sort of commenting, and I just wanted to sort of address those. It says Ukraine in the title, and maybe they are. I mean, maybe they're expat in Ukraine, maybe they're Ukrainian. And one comment I just want to correct. The other comment I want to point out that this is exactly what I was saying at the time. But Trump caused the loss of Avdiivka by not letting Moscow and Mike Johnson approve the aid in 23-24 that led to the loss of Pokrovsk and my home there. None of us from Donbass thought Trump was okay. I have to say, I said these things at the time. The Democrats seem to play into, unfortunately, Trump's hands with this through playing, political games of machinations and not prioritizing Ukraine. It should have been the number one priority was to not let Trump influence MAGA Mike, but no, they pushed out the Speaker of the House, forced that vote. MAGA Mike came in and then blocked everything on Trump's orders. I had those conversations at the time, and this is absolutely the case. I mean, Trump blocked the aid. It had huge ramifications. Ukraine lost territory, and it lost hundreds and hundreds of lives. And let's be absolutely clear. I said this at the time. This guy has said that I'm an extraordinary hypocrite because I've been saying for years that Trump would be better than Biden. No, what I said was that Biden had the tools to help Ukraine defeat Russia. Those same tools are available to Trump. This is what he could do with those tools if he chooses to. I never said that I thought he would or that he could. And I've always pointed out that the likelihood is that he's going to align with a Moscow agenda because that's the character he is. Now, many held out some hope. I also hoped that, given these tools that were in his hands, he would use them. He hasn't. Quite the reverse. He has blocked and prevented others from helping Ukraine, and he's tried to do everything he possibly could to force Ukraine to capitulate. Well, let me also say that was one of the possibilities. But prior to his election, we couldn't know one with the other. Plus, we did episodes together, and I brought you on because I knew you would put that hard alternative point of view that Trump will never help Ukraine. So,
well, let me try to address those points because I've never seen you as a hypocrite in terms of Trump, and so I don't know what he's talking about. But let me just address a couple of points there. I have been and was one of the harshest critics on the internet and social media against Joe Biden and his lack of support for Ukraine. I am still seething about what he did not do. We would not be in. Well, I believe Ukraine wouldn't be in the position it's in. The war would be over.
It would be
Russia
over.
Would have been defeated if Joe Biden had supplied Ukraine with what he promised he would, what the Ukrainians asked and begged him to supply them with. The war
And this
would
is why I
be
tore
over.
into Biden Sullivan, and I was one of
Yes,
the first
Sullivan.
people.
Yes.
Yeah, I was one of the first people who knew who Sullivan was. I was one of the first YouTubers who said, "Look, there is this policy called, and I don't know if we're calling it escalation management, but we were saying there is this policy to deliver to Ukraine what they need at half the quantity that's needed,
Drip, drip,
and
drip.
drip, and considerably later than the strategic requirement
Yes.
was."
Yes.
That was interpreted by a lot of people that I was therefore ushering in Trump. But no, you have to be honest at each point. And I think I became aware of the absolute weakness of that policy towards the end of 2022, but certainly in 2023 it started to become apparent. And then when they were really putting pressure on Ukraine to do a spring offensive, but wargaming it out in a way that was completely unrealistic. I remember having that conversation with Ben Hodges, which is, what is the wargaming here? Because it just doesn't seem really to be realistic. And then we became aware of the huge mines and fortifications that were built. No, I was one of the first people to really rip into Biden and Sullivan because it was clear that Ukraine was not top of their agenda. It was way down their agenda, if they even knew what the agenda was, or whether they were just marking time, which I now feel that's more likely what they were doing. That was interpreted as being pro-Trump. What this guy says here as well is that Harris would have been better. Now, there are many people who don't agree with me, but I think Harris would have been marginally better than Biden. And I know this because I spoke to several people, one of whom was being tipped to be a senior national security advisor in her team. And it became clear to me that it would have been a form of escalation management, but with a lot of the restrictions removed and more provision. So it certainly wouldn't have been enough to achieve anything like a victory. It wouldn't have been substantive, but it would have been a lot less restrained than Biden was. And a lot of the absurd restrictions, I was told behind the scenes that actually a lot of the restrictions on the use of systems that could penetrate into Russia, those restrictions would be removed. They would untie Ukraine's hands on the systems that are being provided, and there'd be more volume, but not the critical mass. It would have been infinitely better than what Trump's done, because they wouldn't have tried to destroy and force Ukraine to capitulate, which is where we are now.
I, of course, can't say what would have happened if Harris became president, but I don't trust her. What she did during the campaign and refused to go against anything that Biden said, which cost her the election. Pretty much, she wouldn't distance herself from Biden's policy. She wouldn't create her own identity. So I'm not sure what she would have done. I tend to agree that it would have been marginally better than what Biden did in terms of support to Ukraine, and probably nowhere near enough. But I wanted to make one other point on this topic, which
that wouldn't have been her main focus. I mean, foreign policy wouldn't have been her main focus. It would have been internal, domestic, welfare-related issues, dare I say it, more of a socialist agenda, which is exactly the agenda we see in the UK. There's limited budget, limited bandwidth, and actually, this administration, even though it seems to recognize the threat, is prioritizing its budget towards welfare and internal issues. I'm sure Harris would have done something similar.
We just talked about the budget a little bit here. That was just past the disgrace. Part of the budget that I didn't mention, talking about Trump and his in quotes support for Ukraine, they did, the Congress, one of the good things I think they did, they refused to remove from the budget an amendment supporting Ukraine. I think it's $600 million that had previously been approved. They made sure that they kept that in this current defense budget against the wishes of Trump and Hegseth, the Pentagon. So Trump was asking for $0. He wanted to completely eliminate all military aid and intelligence sharing for Ukraine. Listen again, $0. Trump wanted to abandon Ukraine. The Congress, with even the Republicans supporting it, kept that in the defense budget. It's about $600 million, nowhere near enough, but it's a lot better than $0. So that's what Trump,
and with intelligence as
Ukraine.
Well, they've kept certain intelligence going. My feeling is that probably that's because Trump simply doesn't know it's being provided and doesn't understand the impact. But we also suspect that No, he doesn't understand, and therefore he hasn't really focused on it. Yeah, Europe. We'll turn to Europe in a minute because
Yeah.
it might seem that we're just dunking on the US. Europe has another form of hypocrisy, which I'll come to in a minute, and it's in some ways more insidious. Well, not more insidious, but it is insidious. We'll come to that in a second. But it's quite clear, it seems, from recent statements and from information that we've got, is that Britain and France and potentially others, although they are the key providers of intelligence, gatherers of intelligence, it seems we're subbing out on the expectation that all US intelligence will cease.
I'm sorry. Thought you might have been overcome with emotion, but I understand.
No, a little frog in my throat
No,
there.
I understand. Well, frog. Don't talk about frog and France in the same breath. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm surprised that the U.S. is still supplying any intelligence to not only Ukraine but to NATO. And to be honest with you, that I understand through my sources is much less than it's been. And all of the NATO nations are very hesitant, including the UK, about sharing intelligence with the US, and for good reason. They can't totally cut them out right now. That just can't be done. But I really hope that they're getting their heads out of you know where and are just pulling back on all of those things right now and for the foreseeable future. Jonathan, the U.S. can't be trusted. They cannot be trusted with intelligence, with support for military. Right now, I don't believe the U.S. would even support or come to the aid of NATO for an Article 5. I really don't.
Yeah.
So
in fact, I think, if we turn back to Greenland, I don't think Greenland's off the table at all, because I don't think no, it's not. Shifting the markets was not the only point of that exercise. There were multiple points. One of those points was to assist Russia in taking the focus off while it degraded Ukraine's energy infrastructure to avoid the global outcry and get everyone focused on that distraction over there. It also has the benefit of forcing Europe to stockpile its own munitions, fearing what's going to happen. If it came to a hot fight, that would benefit Russia even more, or even a siege or a standoff of some sort. That would cause a tremendous breakdown in the relations between the US and the UK, which means that when Putin decides to go full hybrid war against Europe, or when it decides to make an incursion into Eastern Europe in some form, or kick off some major confrontation of the Baltic, or whatever scenario they're cooking up here, they would want to make sure that the US is out of the picture and not going to come to Europe's defense. So Greenland is very much still on the table, it seems to me. They will still be trying to persuade through their minions and assets, trying to persuade Trump that he has to take it by force. That will be a key focus of their intelligence activities. And it may well be a crucial step, as well as Iceland. We'll come to Iceland as well. It may be a crucial step.
Same country, Jonathan. I thought Iceland and Greenland were interchangeable. Yeah.
Is it a 2 for 1? You get one, you get the other one, with no
balls of ice. You're UK, the former defense minister of UK. And his name escapes me right now. He just gave a great podcast about what you're just saying, that this whole Greenland debacle is not over. There is no agreement. And this is going to come back to bite them, that Trump is not through with this. He's like a dog with a bone. He's and not going to let go.
Even if they come to some kind of agreement that the US co-owns the territory where the bases are, this is only contingent. It's contingent on several things, but he may agree to a temporary kind of legalistic agreement. But like Putin, that means nothing. He will tear it up in an instant. Nothing.
Yes.
Tear it up in an instant.
There's no agreement with a Putin or a Trump.
No, there's none at all. And it holds no water. In fact, he despises.
We haven't said this. We have to. I mean, at this point, most people understand this. America has had many military installations on Greenland. Okay, they used to have more than they do now, but we still have a small base, satellite base, way more. And Denmark has always invited America to build as many military installations on Greenland as they want. So this entire lie about we need Greenland for our national security is bullshit. Trump just wants what he wants. He's like a child with a toy, and his mother says, you can't have that, or you can't play with it now. And he says, he'll get it later. And he's just going to keep coming back and back until he has it. whether it's through tariffs or, I'm sorry, I don't think that military intervention, kinetic warfare or an invasion is off the table. I don't. Call
No,
me
it's not.
crazy. I don't.
And it's contingent on how much trouble he's in, because if the economy, as is likely, tanks further, inflation spikes further, and other issues, if ICE, which he really can't pull back from, the optics of that continue to worsen, which of course they will, as they're dragging half-naked old men and 5-year-olds off the street,
Yes.
teenage girls, and the optics of it are appalling.
Pregnant
And
women, you name it. Yeah.
to anyone who's justifying this and saying, yeah, but we have an immigration problem, I'm sorry, but the loss of empathy, just basic human empathy, means that you are so far down the route to fascism. If you think there is any rational justification for the way they are doing this, let's point out that both Biden and Obama actually, by this point in their tenure, had deported more people than Trump has deported.
Yes.
More.
Yes.
But they didn't use it as the performative optics to humiliate.
But that's a fact. We don't want to get mired in facts, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Really
sorry. That's my
pure emotion. Let's get the rage going.
But if the need to suspend the midterms or gerrymander the vote increases, which it will, if the need to further bury the Epstein files increases, which it will,
yes,
I can guarantee that Greenland, and whatever it takes for him to bring back on the agenda, will be back on when he needs it to be, and he'll need to escalate considerably. Because if the kidnap of a foreign head of state like keeps you in the headlines for a week, and an invasion maybe 2 weeks, the question is what's he going to have to do to keep the Epstein files out of the headlines for months? The mind boggles at the scale of chaos he's going to have to unleash.
Well, and people that say that Trump says a lot of things and does almost nothing aren't paying attention. He says a lot of things and they are not immediately enacted, perhaps, but they almost always are. They almost always come to fruition. So he says it offhanded. He says it's a joke. His supporters, his sycophants say, that's Trump being Trump. Trump being Trump is a national disaster. He's a national security disaster, an existential danger to us in the States and the Western world. So it's not off the table. I'm talking about an invasion of Greenland. Look, one of the things I also want to say right now is we didn't talk about Minnesota and ICE very much right now. Here it's the news every day. It's the biggest issue. And one of the things I have to agree with, I was reading some articles in the Times, the New York Times, the Atlantic, several other publications, and they were making a point that the main reason for what's going on, the increased ICE presence, the increased cruelty, the increased aggression by federal law enforcement in Minneapolis is to, of course, spur a counter reaction, a violent reaction from the innocent bystanders, from the people in Minneapolis, because the goal, the actual goal, the end goal is martial law. That's it. It's part of Project 2025. If people don't believe that, they are again being naive. They are again not familiar with 1930s Germany and how fascism unfolded from what was essentially a constitutional form of government. And it just boggles my mind that the mainstream press and the majority of Americans and pundits, Jonathan, I'm sorry, people that are otherwise pretty slick, pretty smart, are failing to realize that this is the goal. Martial law, taking
and
over
goodness, diplomats as well. I mean, this is where I want to go to the next one, because the normalization. The normalization is horrific. Now, I know a number of ex-British diplomats who are phenomenal, and several of them, actually served in Russia. There are several who served in Russia who are appalling and repeat, the worst narratives. But there are some who really kind of understand it and are strong and operating behind the scenes. But generally speaking, there seems to be a cliched view of the world, which is generally shared at the higher echelons of politics, diplomacy, apparatchiks in the EU and various places. And I've interacted with them quite a bit over the last few years, and just yesterday as well. And I have to say, it's whereas we're appalled by Vance and his berating Zelensky in public, demanding gratitude for goodness knows when actually we should be endlessly grateful to Ukraine and Ukrainians for their sacrifice in defending Europe from essentially a brainwashed Mongol horde of raping war criminals. That's what it is. And you know, comparisons to Game of Thrones and holding back, you know, the zombie army of the dead is not or the orcs from Mordor. This has legs in terms of a comparison. Instead of realizing what Ukraine is doing and the threat that we're under, and being just in awe, and every day waking up feeling terrible, actually, that we're not doing more, which I think is how you and I feel. There's a certain hubris, there's a certain grotesque kind of smugness, there's a certain virtue signaling. Oh, we're for Ukraine, of course, we're for Ukraine. But Zelensky's speech, you know, I mean, if we've just given him 90 billion, you know, and he comes and he berates us for our inaction, it's just a bit off, you know, the tone. I mean, he's a great leader and everything, but just this isn't, you know, it's not quite how things are done. Bullshit. He's the only one working and speaking as a leader, while his people are being genocided under an energy genocide, the attempt to erase their culture and to ethnically cleanse them from their lands by making their cities unlivable. He's the only person here and in Davos acting like a leader, because he calls out bullshit and hypocrisy. And I'm afraid I just, as lovely as many European leaders and diplomats and so on are, they are so effing deluded about what is actually happening here, in their cozy homes that are warm and well lit, and they're full fridges. Yeah, I mean, when are they going to wake up? I'm completely with Zelensky on this.
Oh,
it
yeah.
wasn't irrational.
Well,
it was a sign of leadership.
He finally said what needed to be said, and I've unleashed, for the most part, on Trump in America, and so I'll do it for Europe. And it's not the first time. I'm sick and tired of it. I mean, as far as the European support for Ukraine, as far as the European unity to stand up against Donald Trump and MAGA for their own security, what a bunch of cowards! What a bunch of spineless leaders! I mean, Europe took the brunt of World War II. They just did. I mean, we didn't. We didn't have anything. We had Pearl Harbor, and that was about it. Here in the States, the UK, and the continent took the brunt of the European war, the carnage. And now, 80 years later, they have amnesia. They have friggin' amnesia. I'm sorry. And I get criticized about that. Who am I to tell them that they have amnesia? I'm David DeBotto. You've got friggin' amnesia. You're about to be invaded again, idiots. I mean, they're at the hordes, the Mongols are at your doorstep. And you're talking about, well, you can't really cut out all the trade with national gas and oil with Russia yet. It's going to take a few more years. Bullshit. Do it now. Why don't you start freezing your ass off like Ukrainians are right now, and just cut off all the trade, actually. There's still significant business trade between Europe, the EU, and Russia, which most people don't even know. I mean,
whether it's gray market or whether it's legal,
money.
Whether it's the legal trade or the gray trade, or just allowing the Shadow Fleet to operate unchallenged.
Take out the Shadow Fleet. France just boarded one of the Shadow Fleet ships today.
Big wow, you know,
that's
big wow.
great. There's about 100, 500 more. Torpedo them, blow them out of the friggin' ocean and in the Mediterranean. There's international law. Really? Tell that to the Ukrainians right now, especially the ones in Kyiv that are freezing their ass off in the dark. I'm sorry. I get really pissed off at them.
Tell that to Russian hybrid assets who are crawling over Europe, planning and actually executing sabotage. Russian leadership believe they are at war with us, and they are operating on the stance that they are at war with us, and this is going to escalate dramatically this year, especially if they can persuade the US to make a fundamental break with Europe. Then we are absolutely vulnerable to those attacks, and I'm afraid to say we will not afraid to say no one is going to go nuclear, least of all the Russians, actually, because they know that the blowback quite literally is going to be worse for them than anyone else, and they probably understand technically their arsenal is maybe not in the best condition. So no one is going to go that route. The most they might do is try to sabotage a Ukrainian nuclear power station, or try to sabotage one in Western Europe as a signal to us. But the hybrid full-scale war is coming. And a lot of what we're seeing here in terms of trying to divide and conquer amongst NATO allies and peel the US away is basically the foundational stages, I think, for the next level operation. Because let's ask ourselves, Putin is not winning on the battlefield. That realization is hitting him. He does not have the economic clout to win against Ukraine on the battlefield. So what's he going to do next? Is he going to come quietly? Is he going to say, well, do you know what? I tried and I failed. I'm going to hand over the reins to somebody else.
Yes.
No.
I'm sorry.
No, so
no, not in his vocabulary, just like not in Trump's.
He's going to hand himself in. Suddenly his plane, will
he's going to travel to
go,
the
do you know
Hague.
what?
Yeah.
I've been a bad boy, right? Just, no, this is going to happen.
I'm also going to say something I'll get blowback for. It could happen, but I don't believe that anytime soon that Putin's going to fall. That the government's going to fall. And I don't believe, as fragile as it is, the Russian economy is going to implode in 2026. It's going to limp along like, a sick patient. No question about it. Things are getting worse.
Well, I think something else will happen. I think
it's not going to explode, though, as people keep saying that tomorrow
it's
all
not
over.
going to collapse. It'll go into a phase shift. The next phase shift is full authoritarianism and a full reversal to a centralized, militarized economy with a massive ramping up of terror, internal terror. And you can only get away with that if you also escalate the external threat, the perception of external threat, and the projection of aggression. So we're going to see both that phase change within the regime, possibly accompanied by something that looks like full mobilization, but it won't be called that. And we're going to see an extraordinary unleashing of aggression against Europe.
Because that social media platform, Max, that they're now requiring Russian parents to use for official government communication with the teachers, with the schools, WhatsApp and YouTube and so forth, they're all blocked. They've been blocked for a while.
You can get around it through a VPN. I was talking to someone yesterday as an expert, but
Russians don't have VPNs. And
in Moscow,
they do. But my point is, it's Kremlin trying to put the thumb down on the militarization of schools from kindergarten through university. Where they're assembling and disassembling AK-47s again, like in the Soviet Union. That's been going on for years.
It is. And to be honest, they know they don't need to convince everybody. So yes, there's the brainwashing going on, but they kind of don't really care whether that works or not, because that process of the brainwashing and actually having some people see VPNs is actually not a bad thing for the regime, because those people are scared. Why? Because they know they're living in a dictatorship. They know that dictator is increasingly desperate, and there's no limit to the horrors he will unleash on them. So that those who are accessing that information, it has the reverse of it. It doesn't force them into action, rather it forces them into inaction, and it confirms for them their perceived isolation and helplessness. And of course, we know the whole Russian system is a form of learned helplessness, so that you don't conspire to gain power and agency.
I know so many people. I know a lot of people in Russia, and all of them that I know have VPNs, and you know what? They don't use them, or they use them rarely, and they never use them for news. They absolutely do this when it comes to the news, and they don't want to hear anything about Ukraine or about inflation or about anything else. They just want to talk about the newest films, the newest movies, recipes. They're going to go for a walk in the forest. They're going to take a trip to Moscow, blah, blah, blah. And that's it. I mean, they don't want to know anything. And they have access to VPNs. They have access to all the news that you and I do, but they don't want to know about it. The learned victimhood.
It's learned victimhood. It's learned helplessness, and of course, they look on Ukraine with a degree of some look on with a degree of admiration. Some look at it just as horror. Like for many, Maidan is incomprehensible, but it's also quite terrifying as well. They know that there's periods of chaos in their own history, smutne vremena, all this kind of stuff, and of course, it's been drummed into them over decades of Soviet history that freedom brings chaos. Freedom brings starvation. Freedom brings poverty. Freedom brings well, not just that, slaughter on an unimaginable scale, and they're taught to distrust each other and distrust how their fellow humans would behave if given an environment of license. It reminds me a little bit of the old, the if you've ever been approached by sort of Christians trying to argue with you about the proselytizing ones, when they say, well, one of the first arguments is, well, if there was no God, what's to stop you running around, running amok, killing people, raping, all this kind of stuff? And it's like, yeah, that's not exactly how it works. But this is Russia's reaction to freedom, as if somehow, if freedom was an option given to them, just the world would just fall apart, and people would run around massacring each other.
Well, and it's been drilled into their heads for centuries, not so much with the very young today, but that the czar is the answer to everything, that he will give an answer, and that you must believe in a firm hand and not go against him because he has the answer. And we need to go to him. And even today, when villages are bombed or the drones come to Russia from Ukraine, they write letters to the Tsar, to Putin, asking for help, just like they did 500 years ago. And so a lot of that hasn't changed. Sure, with social media and everything else, on the surface, things have changed. But Jonathan, I talk to people every day there. I don't believe that in general the culture's changed that much. I'm sorry.
No, unfortunately not. And actually, the injection of good information to some people actually changes nothing, because unless you are able to organize and do something collectively with that information, it's useful. You as an individual might be better informed, and you might know what's going on, but does that lead to any kind of change? No, unfortunately not.
No. And why be happy about today? Because tomorrow's probably going to be worse. So let's all be sad. And I'm gonna leave it on that cheery note as far as the Russian culture is concerned. We're out of time. We have to go. I know that both of us are going to post this as a recording for those that haven't seen this. So please take a look for this next Friday. I don't know who the guest is going to be, but maybe we can post it and let folks know. But normally we have a guest on our Friday live stream. So we will endeavor to do that again next week. Silicon Curtain, please subscribe. Go to his channel, No Delusion Zone, on YouTube. Please take a look and subscribe to my channel as well. Jonathan, last thoughts, and then we'll sign off.
And this is if the appeasement of the orange demigod continues, it'll just get worse. I mean, that was the main conclusion of Scaramucci and Alistair Campbell on this rest is politics, which I was referring to. But this is the case. If we keep offering our donations to the orange demigod, then he will keep escalating and behaving in this fashion. The consequences of standing up to him, of course, are extreme and probably very negative for those who do it. But at this point, appeasing him will be the worst of those two scenarios.
Appeasement never works, never has, never will, with a bully and a wannabe dictator. And that's what we're dealing with here. And I'm going to leave it on that. Jonathan, thank you so much. And we will see all of you maybe next Wednesday, but certainly I hope next Friday for our next live stream. You all take care. Jonathan, you take care.
And thanks to the comments, some of which we've included from Vuchka, Ukraine, and from Sharia Eyes, who's a stalwart of all these channels and the comments board. And I really enjoyed the comments on these ones, and that's why we showed some, I think, spot on some of it. So that's great.
All right, folks, you all take care and stay safe. And as I say, try to stay sane. Take care.